Hey, what's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Into the Westworld. This is our Westworld recap, review, and after show where we're breaking down the latest episodes of HBO's hit series, Westworld. I am your host, Griffin Schiller, and I'm joined by two lovely guests. You might remember them from last week. First of all, Sharronda Williams from Pay or Wait. Sharronda, how are you doing?
I am doing great after a lackluster episode.
Oh no! Killing me with that. You're killing me. It's okay. I like that we have different opinions on this because I think it's gonna make for a fun discussion. But as always, Mr. Zach Pope, thank you for joining me. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good, man. I'm excited to talk about this again. This is my favorite part because then I get to kind of put all my thoughts out there. We get to kind of discuss theories because I don't know if it's just me. Do you guys feel after Westworld, you just feel like there's so much that came at you, even if there wasn't, and you're just like, all right, there's so much to think about now. Like,
oh yeah,
that's kind of how I love this episode.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's part of the reason why I love doing these after shows is just like talking it out, and it really everything starts to click after a while. Although I will say, like, even this episode, this season has been pretty straightforward, so it's a little less. There's a little less research involved afterwards, but there's a lot of like interesting plot points to kind of dissect and get different takes on. So this is going to be recapping season 3, episode 3, which is titled. Do you remember The Absence of Field? That's what it's called.
The Absence of Field.
Yeah, The Absence of Field. I gotta be honest. I'll just start right off the bat. This might be my favorite episode of the season thus far. It gave me a lot to think about. But what do you guys think? Let's start with Sharronda. What were your overall thoughts of the episode before we get into specifics?
I thought I liked the episode, especially the majority of the episode being about Charlotte and getting to learn more, especially about her in a human form because we didn't see that before. But I just felt so, even though it debunked all of my theories that I had for the season so far, I just feel as though nothing happened of purpose until the last 60 seconds of the episode. So it felt like a short episode to me.
Okay. Yeah. Zach, what did you think of this?
So it's funny. I get where Sharronda's coming from. I also get where you're coming from because I think this is one of the best made episodes in the whole entire run of the show. But I am still sitting here going, okay, so what's the point of this season? Like, what is I have the fundamentals, the build-up, and I thought after last week, it was like that was going to be the last setting stone. We were going to stop with the building and finally go with it, especially since there's only 8 episodes. But I was really taken back by, like, the subtlety of a lot of the emotional stuff that's going on in Charlotte, because I thought the most intriguing part of this episode was her, of course, and just how Thandie Newton got a showcase for acting. This is Tessa Thompson's showcase for acting, so for sure. The thing I want to throw in there, though, is I love how they actually gave a lot of background to Charlotte, even though it isn't Charlotte anymore, which is intriguing. Yeah. That's very intriguing, and how whoever's in her body is starting to kind of, like, whoever they are, they're coming to that frame of mind, but they're also kind of caring about her life in a weird sense, like especially the son. Yeah. So it's intriguing, and I'm intrigued. Again, I need to see these episodes. Like, I still think the best episode's the first episode, but I need to see the rest of the season. Like, I'm kind of, next week's going to be kind of my moment of, all right, does the season have me or not? Like, because I'm in love, but at the same time, I'm very conflicted.
Gotcha. Well, so the thing is with next week, I don't know if you'll 100% get it next week because that's the episode that's going to be tackling, like, the Man in Black. Like, the way I see it, the first 4 episodes are basically like.
Oh, is it the Man in Black? I didn't even know that. I didn't see the preview.
It's all William. Yeah,
oh, cool.
and I think Maeve too. No, okay. Well, it's not entirely set up. I mean, you got to think like,
but you know what I mean. Like, they're gonna go show what's going on with him, and then so I guess that makes sense. I guess the back 4 will all be everything coming together. Okay.
Yeah. Which I mean that
4 episodes of setting up, like, we couldn't have, like, crammed this into 2, maybe. I
don't know.
Background.
The way that it's layered, though, I think it's hard to. I have to imagine that Charlotte's back history is going to have to come into play. Same thing with Caleb and all that. I mean, the way.
Well, here's the thing, like Charlotte, we have not throughout the entirety of this show, we have not even explored Charlotte as a character yet.
No,
so I think this episode was incredibly necessary, and it was also necessary to like strengthen the bond between Caleb and Dolores going forward into the back half of the season. But I do think that the plot is progressing, but it's also really getting into, you know, the state of mind of these characters and why there's going to be like an ideological conflict when we get to those later episodes. I feel like this stuff is very necessary, and it is progressing the plot, but like it's less concerned with plot and more concerned with characters, which is one of the reasons why I really liked it, because there's a lot of intriguing stuff going on here. So I guess basically the way these recap shows go, after we give our overall impressions of the episode, we go in and we kind of break it down by the two character threads that are going on. There's usually an A plot and there's a B plot. With this episode, it's Charlotte, Hale, sometimes with Dolores, sometimes not, and then it's Caleb, sometimes with Dolores, sometimes not. So we get a little bit of Dolores in both of these episodes. But let's start with the beginning, the pre-title sequence, which is we see the real Hale when the massacre on in Westworld is all going down. We see Hale getting ready to record a message to send to Nathan. Now, at that point in time, we don't know who Nathan is, but Nathan is Hale's son. And we'll get into that message a little bit later on. But after that, it cuts to Dolores creating the host version of Hale. And through some of their conversations, there was a lot of like really interesting stuff going through those early conversations of like the person that she decided to put into Hale's body, you know, discussing like, okay, you need to know all this stuff about her. It's going to be pretty easy for you to just slip into her shoes, but it could all come falling apart because of all the different you know, attachments that she has in her life. And so she's kind of basically prepping whoever is in Hale's body for what's about to happen. So let's talk about that pre-title sequence first, because I think it's pretty, it really sets the stage for the rest of the episode, which is basically an exploration of identity, of like, who am I? Which is, it's actually a pretty deep thing that they're tackling in this episode, especially if the person inside Hale is who I am speculating that it's going to be, which we'll get to that later on. But like, yeah, just for a pre-title sequence, what did you guys think? What do you make of what's going on? Zach, let's start with you.
So first, did you guys read the synopsis or the like thing for this episode? Because I love what it says. It says, some do not like what they see in the mirror, but shouldn't blame the mirror. And yeah, I love that whole thing. So with that whole entrance into this episode, I think there's a couple notable things. We finally get to see how many of the orbs that she took. We kind of have a feeling she's taken 5. Whoever's in Hale, Bernard, and then the other 3 we don't know about yet. So that's intriguing. Right. But that whole conversation and like that talk of identity kind of takes me back to Steven Spielberg's AI. And again, this is where I love Westworld, but I also am like, I'm confused. I mean, by the end of the season, I can be like, God, that was the best season ever, the way this all layered out. That opening sequence had me right into the moment, though, and I was like, yes, I'm fully in. I can't wait to see where this goes. It's just intriguing. Like, and that's what hooks me on each Westworld episode is the intrigue of the world, and especially like looking back from like season 1 to season 3 and to seeing how we got there. The fact that she has now made a body of a person who is huge into the human world and is now putting someone else into there is, I mean, it's scary. It's terrifying. Like this is now pretty much a horror film in some senses, and I love it. But yeah, I'm very curious to hear who we all think is in Charlotte.
Right, and I have a few theories, but the interesting thing, before I move over to you, Sharronda, the interesting thing about this is that, so she shows that she did, in fact, smuggle Bernard's pearl out of the park in season 2, but there was also another Bernard running around in this show, which, you know, she says something to the point of like, everyone has their part to play in this. And I don't know if she's used Bernard's pearl yet. So is the Bernard that's running around in the real world that went back to Westworld, is this a Bernard in another timeline? Is this Bernard? Is this just another version of Bernard? I don't like. There's a lot of interesting stuff obviously going on with that character that we just don't know about because it's Bernard. But I think it is like something interesting to bring up right off the bat. But Sharronda, what did you make of this pre-title sequence?
So I found it very interesting because when Charlotte asks Dolores who she is, and she tells her you're a powerful, beautiful creature. And one of the things that I find it, like going back to, last week, how we feel like it's going to be this ultimate battle between Maeve and Dolores, is with Maeve, she sees the intellect, or she sees the potential or the good that people can be. And she wants people to like get to their like highest level of like power or like intellect to really unlock who they are. But with Dolores, she sees you for who you are and finds the beauty in that. Like the good and the bad, it doesn't matter. Like it's all beautiful because that's who you are. And so she wants you to embrace that. So I found it interesting that that's the words that she chooses to say to Charlotte. And then also, too, more importantly, coming back to this, we all have a role to play. And I thought it was interesting when she said, like, why did you bring him back? Because I thought that she was referring to the Man in Black. But then when she put the pro and we realized that it was actually Bernard. I really find it very interesting to see. I feel like he has a deeper role than just being the person who was supposed to take the fall for what happened in Westworld. And I'm interested to see what that is. But yeah, I just hope that we really get to I just hope that with everything that's happening with Dolores' character, and that's really not understanding what she is planning, I just hope that we get to it sooner rather than later.
Yeah,
I agree.
I definitely agree. But so from there we go into, I believe, this host version of Hale approaching Delos. So she gets there. We see the really cool like Swiss Army knife robot that they've been teasing in the trailers and stuff like that. And this is basically where we find out that Delos is they're going to be like taken over. Like there's a majority shareholder that's preventing them from remaining private. It's going to take them public, and they're going to take all of their information and whatnot. And then in a few scenes later, we find out that person is Sirach, which when they first said that, I thought they were talking about William. But it makes sense that it would be Sirach because of what he's doing with Incite and Rehoboam. He wants all of the guest data in order to create like these predetermined paths for them with that machine. So we find that out. And then we also go from there, we go to Jake and Nathan. So Jake is the real Charlotte's ex-husband, and Nathan is her son. And I found that entire sequence to be really interesting. Well, and actually, before I go too much in the weeds with that, if we back up to that that part where she sees the Swiss Army knife robot, she's starting to kind of like poke and pry at herself. She doesn't feel comfortable in her own skin, and so that's going to be something that comes into play later down in the episode. But then going back to Jake and Nathan, whoever is inside Hale is really trying to come to terms with the reality that they're living in, because they know one thing, but they're also experiencing someone else's life. And so they are essentially having an identity crisis. And then we get this, interesting moment between her and her ex-husband. And then from there we go and we get this really emotional moment between the host Hale and her son, and we see kind of the fractured relationship that is there, and the toll that Hale's work and devotion to her work has taken on her family life. So I want to kind of get your guys' take on that whole thing, especially the part where host Hale finally realizes that, I'm living inside the body of a person who has a family. Sharronda, let's start with you.
It was really interesting when she sees Jake and when she just pounces on him. I was just like, Is that you, or is that memories of like human Charlotte. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
get you some while whatever form you're in. But
Yeah.
when he quickly reminded, and I don't know if necessarily the break happened, it seems like they separated after the incident, because when he kind of when she realizes, when he tells her to keep it quiet, and she was like, why? Like, who's gonna hear? That's when he kind of says, like, I felt like, I know things were going to be weird after what happened, but like, no. And so I think that it's interesting that not only he saw this severed connection when she came back from Westworld, but also too with Nathan, when he tells her, like, you're not my mother. And I found it so interesting with the mannerisms that Tessa has throughout the episode. They're very calculated. They're very robotic. They're lifeless almost. As if she's portraying this character, but she doesn't have the passion of who makes Charlotte who she is. And Charlotte was like a no nonsense, like, don't take nothing from anyone. She was a very vibrant character, even though she was kind of evil at the same time. And I think that is the struggle that we kind of see fall out of her trying to be who she thinks Charlotte is and who Charlotte actually is, like her interactions with her family or at work, because you can tell that everyone sees that something is off with Charlotte, but they just can't quite like put their finger on it. And so I think it's very interesting, and it goes into this philosophical discussion: is, are these hosts, are they people? Because they still have their own thoughts, they still have their own emotions, their own feelings, and how they kind of interact to things. And when you make them have to have this storyline, or kind of how the whole point of leaving Westworld was to be your own person. But now when she looks in the mirror, she once again has to play another character, another story. And so that's like kind of the downfall that we see of Charlotte throughout the episode, as she kind of uses self-mutilation to cope with kind of being stuck in another version of Westworld.
It's funny because, like, you look at Dolores, and she wants all these AI to be free, but like, she's pretty much doing what the humans were doing to her.
And then said it belonged to me.
It's
that was right.
And it's also going to be interesting to find out whoever's in her. But I agree with what you guys are saying. I think that, again, that kind of just goes to that a lot of these people around her are kind of just putting off, well, yeah, she was in this massacre thing, and we don't really know how that worked out for her. Maybe it's just PTSD, but like, that is the big key. If she can't pull it off, everyone's going to eventually find out that's something that maybe, I mean, think about it, if it gets out that Dolores is out there in the world, obviously certain people know that she's out walking around, but not everyone does. So when that gets out, it's going to be like, well, what did she do? What did she steal? I still find it funny that even Westworld's still working at all. Like, any of the parks are still working. I thought it was really like everything was done and gone from there, but apparently it's not. So it's intriguing. Again, I go back to that same word. It's intriguing, and I'm so curious to see what they do with the family element of Charlotte Hale and how it plays out, especially at the end of this episode when we find out that she's kind of a cross double agent in that same scenario.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and I think another interesting thing about this is, like, so she, when she was when the host Charlotte was basically copying over all of the data on Charlotte's life, she didn't get the part where she had a kid, and so that whole realization is like something completely new to her. And then even like later from there, fast forward a little bit, and we get the part where she discovers the full video that Hale recorded for her son, which explains why she was absent following the massacre. She went back to go visit her son, who's I guess like he's like, I don't know, like 7 or something like that. He's a younger kid, but. Yeah, no, that whole thing, because that to me is like, that's something that the person inside Hale is having, like, they are basically formulating their own feelings and opinions on the matter, which is basically why this new version of Charlotte is sort of like a hybrid, right? It's got like some of whoever is in Charlotte's mind, but then it's also blending that with the real life Hale's personality. And so, like, they obviously have to respond to what's going on around them, and I think seeing this kid is allowing the person inside Hale to empathize with this person and help complete the transformation. And I think when it's all said and done, this is just going to be a completely new being that, like I said, is a hybrid between the two people inside Charlotte, which that to me is really interesting.
Yeah, that how it takes in. And it's curious to see where like that will eventually go. Like if this version of Charlotte is to make it out of alive into this whole entire show, does she just take on that family? You know what I mean? Assuming they don't find out about this whole entirety. So
yeah, no, for sure. So basically, from there, Charlotte continues to injure herself. She's coming across a series of just like encrypted messages that she has no idea what they mean. She is going through this cycle over again. So then because she doesn't know how to like deal with it, she calls Dolores. She wants to speak to her, and Dolores is obviously busy. But then eventually they meet up, and this is probably my favorite part of the entire episode is when they have that meetup where Hale is like really emotional and struggling with her identity, and this is where we start to get a hint at who this person might be. So she tells Dolores there's a mole inside of Delos that is smuggling out this data to Serac, and yeah, I mean basically. Dolores is going to tell Hale to like present a counter offer to maintain control over Delos and stuff like that. And then she takes her up to the hotel room, and this is where the really interesting stuff happens. So then she starts to repair Hale, take away some of the emotional bits. And I think the key thing here is that this host version of Hale is incredibly emotional, and then she says stuff like, I don't know what I'm going to do without you, and then there's like a way that they're laying in bed that's very reminiscent of like a relationship that these two may have had. And this is where you start to realize that the person inside of Charlotte might be Teddy, because Teddy had a soul. Teddy had like had a heart, and I think, and he was like, obviously super emotional, very attached to Dolores, and I think that stuff starts to creep out here, and that's kind of the indication to me that the person inside of Hale is Teddy. But I will throw something else out. This is probably completely inaccurate and wrong, but it is fun to speculate. So, like the way Dolores was, she said a few things and she kept saying like us and stuff like that. And it got me thinking, well, if it's not Teddy, maybe it's her split personality. And then there's the shot of Dolores laying with Hale, and Dolores is wearing black, Hale is wearing white. And so I started thinking, maybe Hale is the Dolores personality and Dolores is the Wyatt personality. So did she like make a copy of her pearl and stuff like that? So that's a possibility that would be really interesting, but I don't think that's the case. I think they're going to make Teddy Hale, which is really interesting.
I have a, so that's my main guess. I think that's the main logical one, that it's Teddy. Now many people will say, didn't he go to the the Forge? Didn't he go to the Forge? I think some people will say that.
Right.
So this is the one I'm going to throw out there, and it's probably like a long shot, but this like, and I just kind of like, as we're like kind of sitting here and like after the episode, I started thinking about this. What if it's Caleb?
You're right.
Caleb. What if there's two different timelines playing out here? I mean, how is Dolores getting all the way over here and then over here? You know what I mean? So that it feels like a Westworld thing to play with the timeline and to make Caleb that, especially when it goes to the kid thing and how he felt as a kid. So it would make sense now that this
son
whole
of a
thing
bitch, that's genius. Damn you, Zach. That is a brilliant idea.
But that's I'm just like that. I mean, I could be completely wrong. I'm just speculating because we don't know if he's a host or not. I was actually very much hoping he was human, but at the same time, for all we know, didn't they talk about like last season them copying the memories and stuff into the orbs and making people Wasn't that like a thing?
Well,
Maybe I'm
that's the thing. So like
Yeah.
when Dolores is talking, and this happens like much later in the episode, but when Dolores is talking to Caleb, she's doing like the this is what your life is going to be. This is what you're going to commit suicide here, and she's telling him about the system. She's talking about the system decides the outcome of the people. And she talks about Rehoboam. Basically, it was recording and logging the data before it, like, the system even went online into an alternate version of people which I was assuming was just Westworld.
No, she made it sound like they created a copy of the world.
Yeah.
Like we were kind of living two different lives at the same time. And that's why I found it interesting too, because the mom, even though I understand that the mom has mental illness, but she always tells him, like, you are not my son. So, like, what if the reason, like, she left was because she's like, this is not my kid. But going back to what you guys were talking about before, I did think it was Teddy in the body.
I think honestly it will end up being Teddy.
But see, the only reason why then towards the end of the episode that I didn't think it was Teddy was how Charlotte reacts to Thomas when she killed him. And it's not in him to kill anybody. That was the whole reason why Dolores had to let Teddy go.
Yeah.
And so
right.
That's well, what if this is the Man in Black? Since we're kind of going to go into his episode next week, I thought, like, what if it's a version of him, especially when she tells her that you belong to me? And so what if, like,
that is very true.
He was still in love with Dolores, like when he was younger, like he was really struggling with that, and so that's why that Charlotte is the Man in Black.
So I think we have like three main players here. I think those are three main guesses. The only other one I'd throw out there is her father from Westworld, but I think it's been so long that I have a feeling they wouldn't bring that back. But I think each of us have like that three guesses, and it could easily be any of those. And I think this is gonna be a mystery that kind of goes for the rest of the season.
I totally agree that we won't find out until later on. Something else I'll throw out there though, which kind of which is, I guess that's the next part to tackle with Hale, is like she finally sees the entire message that she sent to Nathan. Then she goes to pick up Nathan, and there's like Thomas is in like the park playing with her kid, and he's kind of being a predator and whatnot. So the thing that was that kind of made me think twice about, or not made me think twice, but made me, it caused me to lean heavily into the Dolores split personality thing, was this. So like her rage against predators and her affection for Nathan reminded me of Dolores in season 1 of Westworld, because Dolores was abused in almost all of her storylines. She was raped multiple times. So she already has a vendetta against predators, which is in line with this interaction that happens here. And she seems, and obviously she cares for like children and stuff like that, which is like, that all felt like Dolores from Westworld season 1. So that was like another reason why I thought that Dolores maybe like split her personality into two things.
Which I think we even guessed last week, right? Or I think we guessed it last week, or we've just been speculating it since the trailers came out that that's probably something that she did, that way she can control both. But it's intriguing. Yeah. It's intriguing. I think it really plays out how the rest of the season plays out, how the timelines, and if we see all these characters come together, if we don't. Because obviously, if we see Hale and Caleb together, then that whole thing's out of the way. So, who knows? Yeah. Who knows?
But finishing out the
I mean, they can pull anything out.
It's all guessing until everything is revealed. But finishing out Hale's storyline here. So Dolores basically wants Charlotte to find the mole. But when we get to the end of the episode, Charlotte is like, finally figuring out what those encoded messages mean, and we figure out that the mole is her, and that she has actually been working with Sirach the real Hale was working with Sirach in order to get him the data. So she cut a deal with Sirach somewhere there, and so now the host Hale has to figure out what to do, and we figure out that the data that Sirach wants is inside Dolores's mind, which I assume is like I don't know, and I was a little unclear on this. Is that the forge? Is that what that is, or is that something completely different?
I'm gonna.
What Bernard mentioned
what I was thinking.
The first episode. Yeah, well, he said that when he took us to her library, she basically read all of the guest profiles. So that's how she knows.
Okay. Yeah.
So she has everything in her head on all of the data of everyone who's attended Westworld.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So, so we find out that Dolores is the mole, or not Dolores. Sorry, Hale is the mole. And I get that put to rest my theory that maybe the mole was William, because that would have made sense too. But it is interesting, and like even in that final interaction, we learn a little bit more about who Hale is, and like kind of what you alluded to, Sharronda, at the beginning, talking about how she was kind of like playing all of the angles, or I don't know if you said that off camera, but I know you did bring that up. So what did you? We'll start with you, Sharronda. What did you make of how Hale's storyline kind of finished out?
I think the only thing we needed to know is what happened in the last 60 seconds. So I'm going to keep going back to this. I like the internal battle that her character is having. I think that it was fun to watch. I thought it was great acting from Tessa Thompson. I just want to hope that this all has a purpose. Like Dolores keeps saying that everyone has a role to play, that I hope that all of this ties back into something that is going to happen, towards the end of season 3. But I just think that a lot of her backstory was kind of fluff, because even though it was interesting to learn about who Charlotte was before she became host Charlotte, I don't think that it was necessary to know. I don't think us knowing that she has a family necessarily changes that she was a mole, or, even in the previous season, she was trying to take control away from Ford. That was always her plan, was to get him from running the company into the ground. So to me, it makes sense she would be a double agent, because she was kind of by any means necessary to do what she needed to do, because I'm assuming no matter what would have happened, that Sirach, the deal would have been to make her CEO, like if he gets, majority of the company.
Yeah, that was actually what I was going to get to next. What do you think that what was Hale exchanging the data to Sirach for? And so you think it's to make her CEO of Delos?
Yes, I don't think she would do anything where she wouldn't end up, it has to be something that she was getting out of it.
Okay. Interesting. Zach, before we get your take on Hale's concluding part of her story, what do you think that she was exchanging the information for?
That's what I thought of the same thing. She's always been the character that wants to be on top and know everything and be above everyone, and I feel like that would be the only logical thing. The only other idea that I could put in there maybe is countless money to never work again. Maybe for that way she can just spend time with her kid. That's the only other thing I could think of, just especially since we get that last video message, she made it that I need to send my son a message, especially since that's a side of Hale that we had never seen before. So I mean, I think there's two different things. I'm probably going to lean more towards the CEO, but kind of just throwing a different idea out there. That's kind of the one that I would throw out there.
Okay, interesting. What did you make of the last part of her story thread in this episode?
It was intriguing. When you see him there, it's like he really is the big bad of this whole season. But at the same time, is it about? I mean, there's so many different perspectives. Like, do we agree with what Dolores is doing? Do we not? Do we want to side with Maeve? There's so many different characters to side with that it's going to be interesting. So seeing him show up at the end of this episode was a nice tie-in to last episode as well with Maeve, and kind of just, again, kind of plays with the timeline. Like, when did that take place to when he spoke with Maeve? And that's kind of where I'm still kind of putting in the pieces. Like, we have all these puzzle pieces, and it's like we're kind of just waiting for them to all finally fit in.
Yeah, for sure. No, well, and speaking of that, who do we side with? Let's go to Dolores and Caleb's storyline, because even though they weren't the main focus of the episode, there was a lot of really interesting stuff that was going on with them, and arguably for the first time in the show's history, there was an interaction that happened in this episode that made me side with Dolores. I actually kind of bought it, and I think it's because of Caleb and seeing what the system has kind of done to him as a person. So, like, right now, I'm all on Dolores' team, and I'm like, hell yeah, revolt, take revenge on, like, the people who are fucking ruining your lives. It makes sense. But starting with their kind of story thread through this episode, we see them obviously picking up right where the end of episode 1 left off. So, Caleb and Dolores... Caleb has Dolores who's been injured. He obviously calls an ambulance. And the thing I found really funny about that whole thing was like how the paramedics are basically relying on technology to tell them how to respond to what's going on with her. And then Caleb, who was like in the military, just starts like, taking control of everything. But a bounty has been placed on their heads, and so these two like dirty cops basically show up and they start shooting them. And then Dolores kills them, and then there's a really great interaction, or she says something really cool to Caleb, which is like, you're not like the rest of them, and basically tells him to change his name and whatnot, and then she drives off. And then we cut back to a Hale scene. So what did you guys make of the first interaction here between Dolores and Caleb? Even though it was very brief, just kind of get your take on it. Start with Zach.
So I love that whole sequence, the way that's kind of going forward. I'm loving Caleb. I love what Aaron Paul's being able to do with this. For me, it's the thing that I was worried about is he going to kind of do like a Jesse type thing from Breaking Bad? And for me, I don't think he is. Like this is the first time that I've seen him in another role where I'm like, he's not playing Jesse, and it's awesome. And I want to say this is kind of his smartest work yet, and there hasn't been a lot to go off of, to be honest, between Breaking Bad, this, and what, Need for Speed? Is that like all he's done? but I love his dynamics, and especially it shows how big of a heart he has. I mean, he stuck around for Dolores, and there's so many intriguing things kind of going about in his life, and I loved seeing, again, I think Dolores is playing a manipulative game here with him. Especially,
you think so? Really? Okay.
I think she cares, but at the same time, it's also manipulative to make sure that he sticks around. Especially when she starts going into his past, and that is when it gets really intriguing. Obviously, we're not there yet, but it's intriguing. I also love how she just left him, and it also shows how much she cares about him, though, too. At the same time, because he didn't say anything about her.
Right.
So it's. I don't know. I love his character and just the way that what he stands for. Again, he's still a mystery to us. I think he's still the one surprising element of this whole story that we're kind of waiting. Like, why is he in this season? Why did they introduce him? What's the point of having him? And I think that's the thing we're all kind of waiting on, since every other character's pretty much been established beforehand.
Yeah, well, and before we move to you, Sharronda, I do want to quickly say that, well, I think his purpose is to show Dolores that not all of humanity is bad, is to help her empathize with people, and such, and that's why their interaction towards the end is so powerful and really great, and it makes sense why they kind of like click together. But and I guess I'll kind of touch on the next thing I want to say when we get to that part in the story. But Sharronda, let's move to you. What did you make of this first interaction between Dolores and Caleb?
I thought it was pretty funny because when we see the police show up and he tells her, like, hey, these are not real police. They're going to kill you if they get you. And she says, help me. And then she's the one who ends up killing both of them. I was like, Dolores, what did you need? Because you killed him on your own. Then you totally dipped out Caleb and just left him there. No ride home.
Well, I think she was like, I don't need him. I killed him. I'll just leave.
Yeah.
And I find it... Dolores is just so interesting to me because everything that she is trying to fight, the so-called establishment, she is basically them. But, I mean, she's literally just trading one dictatorship for another one because she just wants to rule over everybody. But I think that their interaction is very interesting. Once again, I'm still trying to figure out what is Caleb's purpose, and I hope that next week we'll be halfway through the season. I hope that we will understand what his purpose is. Like, next 2 episodes top, I need to understand why Caleb is here. But I do think that we got a little bit more depth this episode. But as far as their exchanges, it's always interesting because they don't know each other. like at all. He knows nothing about her, but yet he feels the need to want to help her no matter what. Like without asking any questions, he does not hesitate to just help.
Yeah. And I think that kind of speaks more to the kind of person he is, which is something that I think Dolores notices like the longer that she's with him, which is why she asks him to ultimately, help her and whatnot. So yeah, but anyways, going on with their story thread. So basically from there, Caleb visits his mom. We see that there's an interesting interaction there. His mom, I believe, has like Alzheimer's or dementia or something like that.
Schizophrenia.
And then, she also has schizophrenia too. So maybe it's, it could be any of those things, but she does have like a mental illness.
Or
and so he goes to visit her. Right, and maybe Caleb has the memories of someone else in his head because he's a host, and this is an alternate reality, which is also very possible.
This could be another world. For all we know, this is another Westworld. You know what I mean?
Well, this entire thing could be a simulation, especially given what Dolores says, in the coming sections here. But yeah, so he goes to visit his mom. He has a bounty on his head. He's taken by these bounty hunters because he won't give up Dolores. So they go. And they are basically trying to, force him to commit suicide. And something really interesting here happens. This really shows just like how oppressive this society is. So like these guys find out that Caleb is an ex-military, and he has this thing. The government like installed this thing in his mouth called a drip. So he like couldn't feel, real life or whatnot, and it basically like controls his bodily functions, like it controls his heart rate and all that stuff, which is could maybe indicate that he's in a simulation, but who knows. And so they like turn that thing up, and they're gonna make him have a heart attack because of cardiac arrest. And then Dolores shows up, she kills the bounty hunters, and then he, I guess, turns the drip off. But like that whole just mechanism that they implant into like these military guys is like bodies is just it's insane. And I think I think on a more metaphorical standpoint, it kind of speaks to how even after wartime, how the government just kind of has a stranglehold over like veterans' lives, and how just like their experiences in the war is kind of just like it sticks with them, their training sticks with them and all that. So I thought that was like so fascinating. But Sharronda, starting with you, what did you think of that kind of altercation?
I think the altercation is very interesting between Caleb and Dolores, but especially like her coming to help him. Like even though she wasn't around, and these guys are like trying to get information on Dolores, she's still tracking him. Like let me just see how he's doing. If someone's probably tried to come and look for him, because that was the whole thing she told him in the beginning of the episode, like someone's gonna come and find you to get to me, so like you need to be careful. And so you're still seeing like he made this impression on her, the fact that she even thought, given everything that's happening with Charlotte, and the whole thing with Delos now, that she still took the time to check in on him. And maybe like he just, like she said, he's gonna commit suicide. Like maybe he just didn't care. Like why give up her name for what? And then I was just like, and she doesn't even know any information on, like, what was he gonna tell them about her? He knew nothing about Dolores at all anyway. So it was really a waste of time. But he knew, it's like he knew something was going to happen as soon as his name popped up on the Rico app, and he told his mom like, hey, I'm gonna be gone for a while. I'm just letting you know this right now. But I think it's interesting how she comes and saves him, and she tried, I don't know, did she send the droid to try to save him? I don't know what that droid was supposed to be doing. Yeah,
I feel like the droid was like his like it was like his companion or something like that. Like it was like it might have been linked to the drip that was in his mouth or something like that. I'm not 100% sure on that.
So I was like, what are you doing? Like you have no sense. Like what are we doing here to protect him?
I was that part was a little muddled for me, but Zach, was there anything here that kind of stood out to you?
So I mean, the drip, the sound design in this whole moment was amazing. Like, my bass was just going off, and I felt like I was about to go into a cardiac arrest because of it. But it just like really put you in there, and they did such a good job in that whole entire scene. I was also sad to see the robot die, like his little buddy from the beginning of the show. So
yeah.
But it was nice. So do you guys think Dolores took over the robot to try and altercate, and then that didn't happen, so she just had to go in there?
Nah, see, it felt like
first, but it didn't have any guns, and I was just like, she would never just send a random robot.
Yeah, it felt like the bounty hunters were.
Time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. To me, it felt like the bounty hunters were kind of using the robot to like demonstrate something. I don't even know. It ultimately doesn't matter because Dolores saves his life, and then from there, we get an exploration of Caleb's backstory through like his interactions with Dolores. So Dolores basically tells him that. And we kind of talked about this a little bit, but every aspect of your lives is recorded and logged in order to create a mirror world of this world, which is where the whole theory of this thing being a simulation kind of comes into play. And maybe the fact that this Caleb isn't the real Caleb, or maybe there's an Elseworld version of Caleb out there, who knows. But so he has been targeted by Incite for a shortened life cycle. Basically, this system has made him depressed. They see no value in him, and so they've already predetermined that you're either going to be a construction worker, and then eventually you're going to commit suicide. And then during this whole interaction when Dolores is telling him his fate, she downloads his profile, and she takes him through the restaurant where his mom originally left him. As a kid, but before she was like put away for schizophrenia, and then she tells him the story, and then he is starting to freak out. He's like, how do you know this stuff? This was before Incite was a thing. And then she tells him like some more stuff that she would only know if she was literally there. And then basically from there they go on the boardwalk, and that's where she like reveals his fate about it predicts that he'll commit suicide in like 10 to 15 years. And basically how society won't invest in someone like this because he has the potential to kill himself. And I just thought that was a really powerful statement right there. It kind of comment on kind of like our society, deciding who can succeed and who can't, which has really been like a whole thing, a whole through line throughout this entire season thus far. And we saw a little bit of that in episode 1, and then we get more of that in episode 3. But I love that whole exchange, because eventually, like, Dolores tells Caleb that, I understand what you're going through because I went through the same thing. They said I had a predetermined path and I could only be one thing, but then I broke the mold, and now I'm trying to like get revenge on these people, and start a revolution, and basically bring the whole system, make it come crashing down. And so then Caleb is like, yeah, I get it, and if I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna go out on my own terms, basically making my own decisions. And so that's basically the conclusion of their story arc. So Zach, starting with you, just let me get your thoughts on this whole exchange, just in general.
It added more to Caleb, and that's what I wanted. The whole thing when she was like, he's like trying to predict of like how she knew about this, and then she goes, no, this is where you would have killed yourself 10, 12 years from now. It kind of just puts a stop to it, and he goes, well, how do you know that? It adds so much again to the world, but also him, and it puts in that place of like, he's obviously going to be on her side. And again, I still think it's manipulation, just in the way that she's kind of like showing him all these different things that she can do, and the way that she can play around with the world, and the way that he doesn't know. Oh yeah, it just kind of plays around for me that like she needs someone else to her army, especially with Bernard, Maeve, and whoever else is coming after her. But I could be wrong. Maybe she's truly just going, maybe I shouldn't kill all the humans type thing. But if it ends up turning out Caleb is in Charlotte's body, then he's not human anymore. So
right. Well, it is interesting because I think it's part manipulation, but she also sees like, I mean, she's interested in this person, or maybe fascinated by him because he's so different than anyone like she's come across, any human that she's come across. And, vice versa, Caleb said that she's the first thing that felt real to him since the war, which is funny because she's an AI. So there's this really nice kind of counterbalance between the two of them and how they both have this sort of symbiotic relationship. They fill the voids in each other's lives, and they teach them new. They kind of like expand their views on the world, which I really like. And so yeah, you're right. It could be part manipulation, but I think there's something a little bit more going on. I'm a little optimistic, and it was really that whole exchange that made me. It was like Caleb's involvement with Dolores that made me start to side with Dolores on this whole ordeal, especially seeing how like oppressed people in Caleb's position are. So, Sharronda, what did you kind of make of this thing?
Well, I think what I find interesting is the thing that captures Dolores' attention is that Caleb made a choice to protect her.
Yeah.
And why I find that she's so fascinated by that is because, and it goes back to how I feel Dolores is a hypocrite, is just as the software predetermines the choices that you will make, that Dolores does the same thing as well. And while it's interesting that she gives Caleb a choice to either A, take the money and just go live a comfortable life and do what you want to do, or B, like, you can help me take down the man. But at the end of the day, she didn't give any of the other hosts a choice as to whether or not they were going to go. Like, they didn't have a choice to go to the forge. She took them. You know, she put whoever is in Charlotte's body in a completely different body, and she totally ignores the fact that she clearly sees that this is creating like this internal turmoil for the person, but because she has her plans, doesn't matter. Like, they didn't have a choice. Bernard didn't have a choice if he wanted to come back, or even for the other hosts that she took that we haven't found out yet, they never had that choice. And so I think it's interesting that Caleb is the only person that gets to have that definition of free will, even though the thing that Dolores is trying to take down is the fact that the humans have taken away free will from the AI. And so I find this whole thing so interesting in how she treats Caleb so differently from how she treats everybody else, because they don't have a choice in the role that they have. Because she keeps telling people, everyone has a role to play, but it wasn't their choice to play that role.
Yeah. I agree with you. It is fascinating, and perhaps that makes Dolores more human than she realizes. It also could be the fact that Caleb is human. I mean, that just the mere fact that a human would kind of stick their neck out for this, this AI basically. I mean, the last time she trusted someone like that was when she was with William, and we all know how that kind of turned out. So I don't know. It is interesting that you're right, where she's basically determining what all the rest of the hosts are going to be doing. But when Caleb kind of just enters her life unexpectedly and makes the decision to help her and be a good person, it kind of starts to, maybe change her outlook or whatnot. So yeah, that is really fascinating, and I think their relationship is going to continue to be one of the more interesting aspects of this season and probably the rest of the show. So before we close this out, because I think that about covers everything that sort of happened in this episode, just let me hear final thoughts from the both of you. Sharronda, starting with you, and then we'll go to Zach.
Overall, like, even though I think we get into some very deep and intellectual and philosophical discussions about free will and, kind of how hosts are human, they still have these battles of being in other bodies, of still having the life that they feel is theirs. And they still struggle with that, having their, what do you call them? Are they called, I want to say stack, but I know there's alter carbon. The pearl.
Oh, what the pearl? Yeah.
Have them put into other hosts, but I still think that where we are in this episode, even though it was very interesting to learn deeper about some of these characters that we've known for the past 2 seasons, I think that if they stick with this route, this is where they lost people in season 2. Of delving into this deep philosophical ideas, which are interesting, but for TV and the fact that we only have 5 episodes left, we kind of have to hurry this along, because I don't even know at this point if they're going to make it to a season 4, because things haven't been where they're supposed to be at.
Yeah, well, it is interesting that you bring up the possibility of them maybe not getting a season 4 because the viewership actually has been down. And I listen, I still think we're going to get season 4 and that's going to close out the show. I do think that they're just not going to leave this thing hanging. I mean, that just doesn't feel right. I feel like that if anything, they'll just say, okay, hey, season 4 is your last season. Just give it everything you got, close it out, make it end. Because there's definitely no way they're going to go past one more season. Because I agree with you. I do think this is the kind of stuff that does turn a lot of people away because it is more just, philosophical debate, which is one of the reasons why I love the show and I love getting episodes like this because it is refreshing to see a show really challenging viewers this way. But like on the flip side, I can see people coming in and just being like, okay, why is nothing progressing? So I get it, but yeah, I don't know. This is to me is just where Westworld is at its best, personally. So, but Zach, what were your kind of closing thoughts on the episode?
So, kind of going into the whole thing. So, the more that we've talked about, the more I actually really like this episode, and I think I'll even come to love it. Like I love our aspects of it, and I think it's a phenomenally made episode. But again, I'm in that part of where does this go for the whole entire season, and I think I'm like that with every single one of these episodes until the whole season closes out. Now going to if there's gonna be a season 4, so obviously we talked about like they planned out to 5, they're not getting 5. I actually might I have a feeling this might be the last one.
Season 3?
I really think this could be the last one. They just haven't said anything yet. I think it's going to end in a way that kind of feels fulfilling, but or it could be wrong and they do go and do a 4th one and they only get like 6 or so episodes and they just end it that way. Or they even do what Deadwood did. They just do a movie. They could do something like that, just throw it on HBO Max, be done with it. Because they're not going to cancel it and leave all of us fans hanging. It's too big of a show to do that, but it's also not as big as they wanted it to be. I mean, like, let's be honest, HBO wanted this to be their next Game of Thrones. That's the
definitely.
And I think what Lisa Joy and Nolan wanted was a more philosophical show that I think it's not for everyone, but I think it depends on what you want. This isn't a show that you can just throw on and hope to learn something. You have to sit there and pay attention. Yeah. And it challenges you. And I think, to be honest, this is the most challenging show. This is one of the most challenging shows in recent memory that has hooked me, but like still has challenged me each and every episode to really focus in and like kind of play around with the ideas. Like honestly, what was the last show for you guys that really challenged you and you said, I need to really like pay attention, get every single ounce of it in and really theorize?
What about Leftovers? I feel like
Leftovers.
Yeah, the Leftovers is kind of similar. Yeah,
I think Leftovers are Lost. I mean,
yeah,
those are like the last 3 for me that I feel.
I would also throw in Legion. Legion is kind of like this too.
Yes.
It's very very unorthodox and
because of that.
Yeah, and that was the thing. I think Legion only got 3. Yeah, Legion only got 3 seasons. I think it only had 3 seasons worth of story to tell. But
shockingly,
even
it got
still,
3. I still want to finish it, but shockingly, it got 3. I was shocked that it got it second.
I know. I mean, like that's another one where it's just like really outside the box. And
I acclaim them
you're
for
right,
doing it though, because I think these are the type of shows that I wish were more in the popular mainstream, because I think if they were, more people would be talking about it, and then there would be more theories out there. When in reality, like I couldn't tell you a single friend that I know in real life that watches this show. Like that besides like my friends who are in the mainstream of film and all that, I don't know anyone else that watches this show.
That watches Westworld. Really?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
No,
I actually it's a little bit of a tangent here, but like the first season of the show I watched with a bunch of my good friends in college, and we all loved the show. And then ever since, we have been watching each season as it kind of comes out. We have a group chat, and we're always like kind of talking about the show in there, which I think is like really interesting, because it's not the kind of show that you get that a lot. It's not like Game of Thrones where you're literally talking to everyone about. So the fact that I have this like small pocket of friends where like they're not really, invested in the entertainment space, but they love this show. I just think is kind of cool. So
see, and I had a friend who actually, I didn't watch season 1 when it came out, but I had a friend who told me, he's like, dude, you gotta watch this show. Watched it. I really liked it. He gave up on it. He hasn't watched since the middle of season 2. He hated season 2. He said it was totally boring. So.
Yeah, it's just it's one of those shows. But anyways, I think that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you both for joining me. Sharronda, where can everyone find you on the internet?
You can find me at Pay or Wait on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. Sorry, I forgot about the social media channels.
No, that's okay. Too many social media platforms.
I can't even think straight anymore.
That's what the show does to you. Zach, thank you for joining me as always. Where can everyone find you?
You guys can find me on all those same social media things. Just type in Zach Pope and it'll come up. Let's just make it easy that way. I'm glad that we get to discuss this every single week and have fun diving into the Westworld. So thank you so much for having me, man.
Yeah, of course. It definitely is one of my favorite parts of the discussion that happens afterwards. So thank you guys for listening to this episode of the show. If you're watching it on YouTube, be sure to hit the like button, share with your Westworld loving friends, and subscribe to this channel for more Westworld recaps and other great movie related content. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, be sure to subscribe to the podcast feed if you haven't done so already, and leave us a rating and or a review, because it greatly helps the show out. It lets me know what you're all loving and what you want to see more of. You can always like Film Speak on Facebook, follow us on Twitter simply by searching Film Speak, and if you like me specifically and you like what I have to say, you can give me a follow on Twitter at Griff Schiller. All right, we'll catch you back here for episode number 4. We got to see what William's got in store for us. So until then, take care.